So if you've watched this channel for a while, you'll know that I'm always asking Doctor Who to be political, to be angry, to be real. Well, the gods have answered my prayers and given me Lucky Day, and it sucks. I didn't like this one, and I'd like to dive into why. The episode starts how we've come to expect Season 2 episodes to start. It's the Doctor and Belinda. They've arrived at a new location. They do some vindicating. It's not a mind-blowing scene by any means, but I think it's nice to see that, Belinda is still unhappy with this travel situation that she's in, and the Doctor is still enjoying everything a little too much for the situation. So I quite like that, and again, I said last week, I hope that is a source of conflict going forward, and they don't just become happy chappy companions. Again, not much to pick apart here. I just wanted to mention it because I like Belinda, and I did miss her for the rest of the episode, which I think speaks to how much I've grown to enjoy her as a character. And I did get a kick out of seeing all three members of the 15th Doctor's TARDIS teams in the opening credits together, even if they weren't in the episode together. Hopefully that's still coming. But then after that opening scene, we break away from the Doctor and Belinda's point of view and start following Conrad for a bit. And I love the fact that he saw the Doctor with Belinda first and then saw him in a previous adventure with Ruby Sunday. I've always thought the show could make more of people meeting the Doctor out of sync, out of order. I think obviously the show does it sometimes when it's the point, but I think sometimes it should just happen and it not be necessarily the main thing. And I know it kind of is the main thing here, but I had a great conversation once with someone about Blink, and Sally Sparrow at the end when she meets the Doctor, or the Doctor meets her for the first time, and it's the first he knows of everything, and she's seeing this kind of previous adventure. I think it would have been cool to set that in Series 2, so you have him either with a Rose cameo, or Rose is off-screen, but he mentions it, and it's kind of a glimpse at this adventure we didn't see, and they're kind of really clearly signifying it. Not really relevant to this, it just reminded me of that, and it's kind of fun that we do get this, that, the character sees the Doctor in a previous adventure, and it is the previous companion back for that adventure. I thought seeing Ruby and the Doctor, it was fun. It was like, oh great, this is an adventure we've not seen before. They tie it into the fact it's just after Devil's Cord. I thought potentially the dynamic between 15 and Ruby was a bit grating. I don't know if it's just because they've tried to distill that whole season's vibe into like a couple of minutes. They've tried to like, hey, remember this? It was like this. They were besties. But it struck me as a little annoying, and made me realise how good we have it this time round. And that may be just because I'm enjoying the dynamic this time round that much more. But I thought that was an interesting kind of observation. The adventure we get a glimpse of, the monster that they're dealing with, ended up being a little bit more relevant to the rest of the episode than I expected. I thought it would be like that thing in the Love and Monsters, that thing in the Love and Monsters that Elton gets a glimpse of, but it doesn't matter. Whereas these things, the Shriek ends up being fairly important, although never really the point of the episode. As a design, they're fine, I think. Their best moment is when they're not in it. It's when Ruby is describing what would happen if one showed up. I think that was just a wonderful, wonderful little scene that, you just have those non-diegetic elements kind of coming in as Ruby describes it, with the sound and the visuals. And yeah, it's just this sudden, surprising moment of real style and, as the kids would say, sauce. It's this kind of, oh, you know what? We're doing something here. We're doing filmmaking. That was the highlight of the episode, is Ruby describing the Shriek. Which maybe says a little bit about where we're going with the episode, but no, I think that would have been good in any episode. Speaking of Ruby, this episode has reminded me that I think Millie Gibson is pretty great. I think I still wish there was more going on with Ruby as a character and as a companion, but I think as an actor, she does have this ability to be the protagonist and carry an episode like this, or 73 Yards, on her back very effectively, and I think that should absolutely be commended. Picking up with her after her travels is good. I think, I don't know, it feels really authentic. It feels like there has been this gap between when she was companion and now. And that may be for me because my whole life has changed in that time. And it's like last year feels like a very long time ago for me. But I don't know, it feels like when you talk about, oh, I used to travel with this guy and, now I'm back home and it all feels so strange. I really bought into that in a way that I haven't previously. And I'm thinking maybe that's because, you binge the episodes when it's Amy Amy and Rory. Now I'm rewatching all that, and I'm like, you know, there's not been a gap. They're just pretending there's been a gap, but that's because I've been watching episodes back to back to back. But for me in this moment, I was like, yeah, this is a nice exploration of kind of, you know, checking back in with a character and seeing what they're up to and what they're like. I thought that was a nice element. I also like when companions have stopped being companions and we check back in with them and they've kind of become Doctor Who. I think, you know, it's something we saw Rose do in Turn Left. She's absolutely doing David Tennant Doctor Who in that. I mean, Sarah Jane was the Doctor so much that she got her own show. But even like Graham in Power of the Doctor, we kind of touch back in with him and he's doing doctory things. And I think that's fun. And I think Ruby stepping into that kind of position of I'm in charge. There's a dangerous alien situation here and I'm the one who's capable of dealing with it. I've had the most experience with it. I thought that was really fun, and I think that moment where someone's like, why should we listen to you? And she's like, all right, then don't. Go out and die. Like, no, it's not. She doesn't have this kind of cosmic importance that gives her the authority. She just has the experience to say, you know what? Don't listen to me then and see how it's like outside, you know. I thought that was a really great, fun moment. The return of Ruby also means the return of Carla and Cherry Sunday. They were really fun in this, probably the best they've been so far. I think that little moment of them being excited for her date and the fact they've stalked Conrad, I don't know, it made me wish we'd seen more from these guys because it feels like, given the material, they could have turned into, like, not, you know, as iconic as like Jackie and Mickey and the Rose Tyler extended cast, but I think it would be nice to have something near that. I think the romance, the relationship we see develop between Conrad and Ruby is meant to feel a little off, a little rushed. At least I hope it's meant to feel that way because it does feel that way. I don't know, I think you can buy into it as Ruby being this kind of wide-eyed girl, desperate for love, desperate to belong, desperate to fill a kind of void in her life, to the point where she overlooks the red flags. I worry maybe a little bit it makes Ruby seem stupid. I feel like why, you know, you see someone post a picture of you online that, you know, that just they've taken of you in the street, who is this woman? And you're like, I'm going to go on that podcast. I don't understand, and this is less a Ruby thing and more like Conrad is a, you know, fairly, it would seem, high-profile influencer, or at least high-profile in a particular circle, and he's able to, I don't know, successfully pretend he's just like a Doctor Who fan podcast. He's like, I'm just a cheery guy looking out for the TARDIS. I've been interested since I was little. But also, here's my account with 50 billion subscribers where I go, Unit's evil and we're taking over the world. I don't know, that feels weird. I feel like Ruby should be able to have seen that in a background check, or that Unit should have been aware of him anyway at that point, and Kate gone, oh, that guy actually. I don't know, I guess they were just going viral in their own little circles, like the Riddler and what's it called? The Batman. I nearly said Rizzler there, and that would have been second week in a row I mentioned the Rizzler, so thank God I didn't do that. I mentioned Unit. It's nice to have Unit around as such a presence. I've said this before. I think there's a conversation to be had, and believe me, I will have it, about their depiction in this era, but it's nice to have them around. It's nice to have that, you know, recurring set, that recurring cast of characters, that recurring musical theme that for some reason turns into Heaven Sent in the middle, that they're doing that kind of Russell T Davies 1 era, and then it just goes do 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 do, and it's like, Murray, you've used that before twice. You did. We don't need that again. That actually has an existing association. Who else is here? Kate. I think it's really funny that Kate is good now. Like, she's just a good character who I like. I've said it before. I said it last season. I said it in the specials. She was around for 10 years and did nothing for me at all. I thought she was just a really nothing character, and every time she came back it was embarrassing that she still had as little going on as she does. But I don't know what it is. As soon as she stepped out in the giggle, there's just this different side to her, this edge, I think. This kind of, she feels tired and stressed, and I don't know, I buy all these different sides to her. When she's kind to Ruby, when she shows that level of darkness, you know, that kind of I don't know, when the Doctor's not around, we can't afford to show the same level of compassion that he would want us to show because he's unrealistic and we're at war. That kind of attitude comes across as authentic in a way that I think previously it just comes across as, I'm UNIT, I don't know. It's interesting that I'm happy to see her. And every time we see her in this era, it's like, yeah, great. I mean, maybe all that Sutek stuff that went on last year, the less said about that, the better. But other than that, great character. Colonel Ibrahim, I mean, what a ridiculous, awful character he is. I said I bought all the different sides of Kate. This relationship they seem to be pushing with her and him, very strange. It kind of reminds me of... I think someone else has made this comparison, but like the old meme or headline or whatever that's like... He's gay and she's a lesbian. Their marriage will change your perception of love, and it's like, yeah, these were characters that everyone had basically headcanoned as homosexual, and then suddenly they're smooching. Strange, weird. It doesn't matter yet. I think it will. It's such a minor part of this, but we'll have to see in the spin-off. Shirley's back. It was nice to see her. I kind of remembered what a fun presence she was, and I kind of had this awful dream that last year they'd replaced her with a child with a gun in his Segway. So it was quite nice to be reminded that didn't happen and that Shirley has always been the unit scientific advisor. I rolled my eyes when she was like, "Oh, and you, random analyst, data man, come with us. You'll join the crew this time," because it's like, okay, he's relevant somehow. He's like Harriet last time, Harriet Arbinger. It just doing the exact same thing again, that this guy clearly has Conrad connections. And it's so funny that the Vlinks can just be like, oh, we've got some potential issues. Here's this guy who it turns out is an evil Nazi, and we can just see that if I do a little scan. He's got all these weird politics and supporting all these dodgy organisations, and yeah, maybe we should be automatically running such scans on our employees, but if we go looking, we can find things like this basically instantly. So thank you, the Vlinks. Another useless waste of time, who I can't bring myself to actually hate. I'm kind of joining in the hate train there, like, oh, the Vlinks, what even is the Vlinks' deal? I think it's just quite funny to go, here's Unit's robot in the corner called the Vlinks. Let's talk about Conrad. I think as a character, he really works. He feels very well observed, very authentic. I think you do fully buy into his psychology and the kind of questions that raises of how does someone get to this point? Does he believe what he's saying and what he's selling, or is it just something that makes him money? Does he know the difference between those two things anymore? I think the detail that he's just got this personal grudge against UNIT and he's masking that in all that kind of political movement stuff is really great, because, you look at people like Elon Musk, so much of what he does is just pettiness and, desperation to control elements that he feels have wronged him over time. So I think that really works, and I think as a performance, I think you do buy that that kind of history to him, and that he has kind of been poisoned by his own toxicity. And I think when he shouts at Ruby, he says, "The grown-ups are talking," that's a moment of real sadness and cruelty, and I think he and Millie Gibson really sell that moment. And I don't know, I think they play that betrayal really well, and I think, yeah, on a personal character level, he is well struck, well realised. It's just that everything around him is absolute nonsense. Conrad's whole movement is clearly playing on real-world examples of the campaigns against migrants and trans people and the disabled. But in this episode, the target, the victim of this campaign is UNIT, the government organisation whose first act of this era was to chuck a journalist into the back of a van. I know the campaigners in this episode are leading with aliens aren't real, which we know is, not true. We know it's anti-science, anti-truth. In that sense, it's more in line with COVID conspiracies, anti-vax, chemtrail, all that kind of nonsense. But to kind of pair that very conspiracy-brained stuff with the fairly reasonable UNIT is doing shady stuff is to position them as both of those points as equally questionable, equally, conspiracy nut talking points, which to me feels like nonsense. No, it feels worse than that. It feels harmful. At a time where our tax money is being used to do horrendous things, and the people that call that out are being labelled as bigots as part of a hate movement, I think taking these two very different things and saying they're, part of the same problem it feels incredibly out of touch, and it feels dangerous. I know we have a slightly different, more recent stuff, the kind of Doge efficiency nonsense in the US, where it's kind of creating, manufacturing this mistrust in government agencies that aren't being seen to do anything real, aren't being seen to contribute anything. I don't think this is that. I think as a script, it predates that. And I think even if it was that, UNIT isn't the Department of Education. They're the FBI. I think the script is trying to throw enough real-world elements and parallels at you that you overlook the fact that it doesn't really have a real point to make at all. There's no applicable allegory here. If you kind of sit and pick apart what it's trying to say, you're either left with nothing or a fairly troubling something. The angle of defense that I've seen a lot of is, well, obviously, if you're critical of the state for the right reasons, this episode's not about you. And for starters, I think this episode is so clumsily written that it's not obviously doing anything. But I think to say it has drawn a clear line here between the right way to criticize the state and the wrong way, it is laughable because it hasn't made any sort of exception, I don't think. What this episode has done is give us a glimpse at this online youth movement, as they call it, and it's this sea of very diverse young faces talking about this social cause that they're fighting for, and it looks more like, a sea of leftists educating you about Palestine than it looks like any sort of right-wing conspiracy chud convention. And it's hard to not feel like they're tarring the two with the same brush here. I think the episode's general message that spreading fear and misinformation and hate and, making a profit on that is bad. I think that's a pretty good message. But I think, hey, leave the government alone. They're just trying to help. That's not a good rebuttal to that at all. When people are spreading lies and mistrust, even when the government is the target of that, fighting against it with unwavering support of the establishment isn't the way forward, and to me suggests kind of missing the point of why any of that stuff was bad in the first place. I think what this episode offers as criticism of UNIT's behaviour is incredibly surface level and nothing in comparison to how much it seems to be telling us to support UNIT. For every moment of, I'm not sure Kate should be going that far, there's about 3 of an authoritative figure in this story telling us, they're doing their best, they're doing their job to protect you. And it's like, we know there are aliens, but I think, is that the best you can do? Is it the best to say, they're fighting against aliens and therefore we should be on board with what they do? Does it have to be the options bad and worse? Are the actions of bad made better because we know there's a worse out there? This feels like it might be relevant elsewhere politically, but I'm so focused on Doctor Who right now, I'm missing that. Ruby says they're amazing, doing good work protecting people like you. Kate implies they're the only people in the world that can be trusted with this alien technology, and we're kind of just meant to take that as a given. It's not something we're ever meant to question. It's just a way of raising the stakes. It's, if the government let UNIT fall, then someone else will have this tech, and only UNIT can have this tech. We get our Brigadier reference. She reprimands Conrad and is like, you have put the safety of this planet and everything my father stood for at risk. And we're like, yeah, you tell him. They live stream the episode's climax, and despite the fact they let an alien loose onto Conrad, hashtag I stand with UNIT starts trending. And thank God we've got public opinion back on our side. It's like, what's going on? It's funny to me, I'm not the first to mention this, but it did occur to me at the time that 20 years ago, the government is creating fictional enemies to justify doing whatever they want. That was something the episode was saying in World War III, Aliens of London. It was being very political in that sense. And now it's the point that the villain is making, and the episode is trying its best to prove it wrong. And that feels an interesting kind of 20-year difference between these two stories. We get Trinity Wells, and I think she's meant to be positioned as bad. She's kind of the Fox News equivalent. She's hyperbolically talking about fascism on the streets of the UK. But what Conrad and his friends did in that village was a harmless stunt. He was an innocent man, and Kate just arresting him like that was fascism. So I don't know what it wants us to think. It feels like optics-wise, Kate should know that they probably shouldn't arrest these people, talking about how shady their organisation is. But also, I don't think they should have the power to arrest normal human beings for things like this. There were clearly some well-observed elements that went into the character of Conrad, but I think the way this episode portrays the media response to him is totally implausible. I think the press has been guilty of amplifying harmful things over the years, but Think Tank specifically feels like the kind of, we're outside the mainstream, we're telling the story that the news never would, and the idea that they, take a guy like that and put him on the one show, that just feels totally incompatible. Also, the idea that the state could be doing something dodgy, that a young person could be protesting that, could be arrested as part of that demonstration, and then be interviewed on the one show where he gets to say, they're trying to silence me, but we've got a point to make and we won't go down, on the BBC. That's how you know this is set in a fictional universe. Even the Doctor's scene felt a bit off to me. It feels like it should have been great. It should have been one of the defining moments of the era of this incarnation of the character, and I think it certainly thinks it is, but it fell flat for me. I like how it's shot, I like how it's performed. I think starting in kind of cheery, nice Doctor mode and then turning mean very quickly is very effective. I love the idea of telling this hateful loser how he's going to die alone, specifically. I think that's great. I wish I could do that, but I think the rest of the speech, when he starts kind of elaborating, it feels a bit preachy and waffly. I think the preachiness would be fine if it wasn't still so infuriatingly vague and in line with the rest of what this episode has been doing. He says he's fighting on behalf of everyday people who just want to get through their day and feel safe and warm and fed, and then along comes this noise. And I don't know if I'm just on high alert after the rest of the episode's optics, but to me this was unspecific enough that it feels like you could apply it easily to any disruption of the status quo, not just the ones that we on the good side consider harmful. It struck me as the same adherence to the norm that led to the 13th Doctor lecturing people about how they chose to rise up against capitalism and Amazon, rather than having anything to say about any meaningful change to the system itself. And I know he goes on and he talks about how they've weaponized fear and, they're latching onto insecurity and all these things that get a little bit closer to making a specific point. But it still felt unspecific enough that you could apply this kind of attitude of, I just want to grill for God's sake. I just want groceries to be lower, but there's all this noise of, climate protesters and they're causing all this trouble in the streets and we just want to get on with our lives and, all these trans activists, can't we all just get along and let people have their own opinions? Do we have to hear about Palestine every single day? I don't know, I might be being completely unfair, but I think the episode has done very little to convince me that I am, to be honest. I think it's one of those things where I wish I could look at that and think I'm being totally unreasonable, but from what I've taken from the rest of the story and the script, I don't think I don't think we're a far cry away from that. I think I don't know, the Doctor, it feels like he should really be coming down on something specific, and people are saying he is, but I don't buy it. I think they've left it vague enough that you can apply these meanings to it, and they're meanings that I can't guarantee the writer doesn't have in mind, because look at what we saw with the youth movement and I don't know. It feels like the main problem that the script has, the main, gripe that it has with society is kind of any disruption, any kind of people loudly making noise about things, good or bad. It's tarring them with the same brush, it's lumping them all in together, and that is rancid. Some of you have probably already written comments about how much I've missed the point here. I've already come under fire on Twitter for how much this has gone over my head. And let me tell you, nothing goes over this head. It is just too enormous for any of that. I know exactly what this episode wants me to think it's doing, but I don't believe for a second that it's actually doing it. I get everything it's throwing at me, and I see through it. I'm not satisfied with a script that clumsily gestures towards a point and expects me to pretend that just because I understand what it's kind of pretending to say, that I believe it has said it. I've seen a lot of hostility towards people that don't like the episode or have a problem with the optics, and a lot of kind of, you clearly didn't get it, you know, and I'm not just talking about myself, I've got fairly thick skin, but it's turned very mean very quickly. Lots of, you know, questions about media literacy and all that. And I don't know, I'm surprised at how many people have liked this episode. And I think if you have been able to get from it more than I have, then that's good. And I'm glad not everyone's as miserable as I am. But I think to kind of say that to look at this and see iffy politics is, you know, inherently biased against the show, or you know, bad faith takes or whatever. This is the writer of Kablam, man. You know, you don't have to work hard to see a kind of dodgy implication here, just as you didn't last time, just as the people that pointed it out last time weren't acting in bad faith. It's here, if you notice it. I don't know, I don't at all want to imply that if you liked this episode or didn't get the vibes that I got, that you know, didn't get it on the level that I did, because that's awful and pretentious, and clearly you're all watching me, so you're very intelligent people, but my experience with this episode is one that other people have shared. I don't know, I can't look past it, and I think I wish I could say, oh, it's a great episode, weird vibes aside, but I think it's really hard to put those weird vibes aside. I think compare it to something like 73 Yards, where you've got this political element that I didn't think was particularly fleshed out. It's all that stuff with nuclear bombs. It's easier to put that aside because of how unfleshed out it is, because it's not the point of 73 Yards. Whereas this is the point. This is everything it's doing. So it forces you to scrutinize it. I don't know if it's because I'd already turned against the episode, but I think even trying to disregard the politics, that finale, that climax feels a bit flat. Kate lets out the shriek, and then it spends what feels like 100 years chasing Conrad around that bloody office. It's ridiculous. It's like, I timed it. It's like a full 3 minutes. And it doesn't tell you anything. It's not scary, because at that point we want him to be eaten or killed. It's not, I don't know, there's nothing that it really adds to the character beyond a few looks of, okay, you're taking this a bit far, which you can do in 30 seconds. I think it kills all the momentum of that episode. So there it is. There's a complaint that's not political. There's not just me being a, you know, bickering leftist tearing down this episode that's clearly on my side, but I don't think it did it properly. There's an actual criticism of Doctor Who. Mrs. Flood is here as well. I don't know why I feel the need to mention her every week, because we're going to get her every week. But if we're looking at how it's dealt with the series arc, by the time that scene happened, I was annoyed that the credits weren't rolling already. So, yeah, I'm so grumpy this week, man. But yeah, I've got nothing to say about that. This was my least favourite of the season. Obviously not without things to like. I hope at the start of this video I was a lot cheerier about things, so remember that. But yeah, I can't get behind this at all. Let me know if you had a similar experience, a totally different experience, somewhere in the middle. I know it seems like most people liked this more than I did, which again I think is good, because yeah, it's not fun being a grumpy miserable old man. But yeah, let me know, change my mind, tell me how wrong I am in a way that is less hostile than some of the takes I've seen on Twitter, or at least if you are hostile, back it up with good rebuttals to my points, because then I'll go, wow, you know, they were mean, but they were right. Yeah, thank you for watching. Let's hope next week is better and I'm cheerier and I'm back on the this is a good season hype train. Because at least I think what's good about this is that it's a weird outlier anyway. Like, it's the Ruby episode, it's the interlude, it's the Book of Boba Fett episode where you just follow the Mandalorian for an episode. And that's pretty good, because I think if I think of season 2 in my head, I'm like, the Doctor and Belinda, what a time. And I don't think about this. This is the season 1 epilogue. So in that sense, you know, the hype train's still going, guys. Woo woo, love you lots. See you next week.